Greeting Datocrats. This is Ernest Prabhakar. I accidentally started the video stream before my companions are here, so I will be forced to solo freestyle until we get the rest of the team up here. We are having this call on November 15th, a week or so after the US presidential elections. I'm curious whether our friend Ernest will be able to join us. I'm sure he's had a rough couple of weeks dealing with the surprisingly strong showing in favor of Trump, which Ernest was working very hard to defeat. And it's a really interesting season for democracy. Um, and we are exploring a number of really powerful and interesting ideas for what democracy means, what can even be done in the future, how can data and new technologies help us do a better job of solving our most urgent problems. So hello, Tom. Thanks for joining me. I was just saying, I don't know if Ernest is going to make it. Oh, Ernest is coming. Good. I accidentally started the YouTube feed, so I've been soliloquizing while we've been waiting. How have you been doing?
Good. Quiet, retired, not going anywhere, reading a lot, writing a lot, talking to
Yeah,
people at home.
looks like you're
Yeah.
back from the lake.
Yeah. Yeah. We've closed the cabin for the season. It's sort of cold there. Although some of the boys go and visit it when they want to meditate or get away from everybody.
Sure. And then is it, when does, how far north are you? Is it starting to get like dark all the time?
Oh, yeah. No, we're actually we got one more month and then it'll start getting lighter and lighter. So we're in the middle of the dark season. Yeah.
Okay.
So it sort of gets what do we get? Sunshine around 11 and 5 in the afternoon is pretty dark. People go to work in the dark and they go back in the dark, and the daytime is when they're at work at the office.
Ah, yeah, well, it's getting close
Ah,
to that.
sucks. But
It's
we make
close to
up
that
for it
here,
in
but
the
that's because
summer.
people work 12-hour days, so that doesn't necessarily tell you very much.
No, so there. We like it here. It's a good place to be.
Right. Ernest, are you thinking of moving to Norway?
Yeah, sounds like a good idea. If
It's a
I'm not,
very good idea.
yeah, before I'm
But
deported, I'll be deported.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
Well,
uh,
it is simultaneously the richest country in the world per capita, I think, and also the happiest.
yeah,
The combination of being rich and happy is a pretty damn good combination.
yes, and possibly the only country in the world to successfully avoid the resource curse. Right? I don't know if
Yep,
you've heard this
plenty of
from
resources.
economics. Right. Yeah, the idea is that
No,
if you have a research-rich country, then the political system optimizes to exploit that for whoever is at the top. And the Sovereign Wealth Fund
wow,
of Norway was a brilliant innovation, maybe modeled a little bit after Alaska's, but where the the wealth was used to sustain society rather than corrupt it. So impressive achievement.
absolutely.
yeah,
They put all that money in the bank for the future, and they only use a maximum of, I think, 3% of the profits can go to the government's expenditure that year. And they've been good at keeping that because uh, they really are saving for the future like no other politicians. I mean, the British don't even have a thing like that at all. Like
Yeah.
they've spent it long time ago. Same North Sea oil.
Yeah.
what would it take for that to happen here? Uh,
Communal solidarity.
well, we don't
Yes,
have
something like that.
there's
There's a very strong Norwegian tradition of solidarity, that we want to, everybody supports everybody else.
that's
And
an effect of your geography, right? The way of you have a bunch of communities separated, right? And you have to like
yeah,
because of the environment and the weather and all those things, you have so much.
good point. I don't know where it comes from, but it's very strong and very explicit. I mean, as late as today on the news, they were talking about it, that where they're talking about taxing the rich, and then they said, "Well, we've got to do it to keep things even around here."
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it
That's
also helps if you're only 5 million people, right? As opposed to
that
be
helped.
70 million
That yeah,
and an empire. Like being an empire and being coherent are almost contradictions in terms. We may get into that later. But when there are cities which can have a strong civic identity and sense of unity. There's certainly kingdoms like that. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Um, the things that make it work are often the things that keep it from scaling. The way the Vikings conquered the world was very different than the way the British conquered the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, one could argue that the Norwegians have a great society because they sent all the troublemakers out to colonize and conquer the rest of the world, and the people left were sane and happy.
that could be. That could be. Or there's another variation of the same theme. We all of the malcontents in Norway got sent to America. They immigrated there, to Minnesota and Wisconsin principally.
Yes,
Huh.
where they're poor and grumpy. No, they're incredibly polite. That's the Minnesotans. So Ernest, Tom has a document. I have a document. Your document came out before the election. I wanted to hold any space you have if you wanted to react, or do you want to just forget about it and move on?
Well, yeah, I'm actually working on another one that is, post-election, of course, is not the one before the election. It was more upbeat and hey, this other one is different. So it's uh it's very different. It's very critical of about a bunch of things, especially religion. And that's why it's taking me so long to finish it. Still an article about the same length, but it it calls on specifically women to live up to their suffragettes models. Like what's going on with you? What look at the women who got you the vote, and look at how you guys use the vote to put this person in power who represents everything that goes against women. You know,
Okay, so let me just take a moment here to make sure I'm hearing you correctly, Ernest. How is that not mansplaining, telling women what they should think?
well, it's I know as a man, I shouldn't know anything about this, but I'm a feminist. I'm for the matriarchy. I'm like uh uh you know
So you
I'm
think you have better right to speak for women
no
than
no no no
women
no.
who are
I'm
not
not speaking. I'm
feminists?
not speaking for women. I'm speaking making some observations and yeah, really, like the women are being killed for being women, and yet you vote for this guy who is the one who instigated all this. So
Right, right. So,
I'm
so,
not
but,
trying
but,
to
but,
educate
so,
them.
but,
I'm
but,
trying
but
to
let me ask you: is your point that you think they should be voting based on what you think is most important for them, and that if they vote on something that they think is different or more important, that that's wrong?
uh essentially, part
Okay,
of
as
that
long
is
as you own
there.
it, that's fine.
And
Cool.
I'm just like as an observer, outsider, kind of. I'm saying, uh, look, you guys, you have been abused and dominated because you are women, even though you have the power of creation. Through you, humanity renews itself, and because of that power, is that men want to put you down. You observe everything.
Right.
Kings
Right. So,
and
so
so
sorry. This is okay. Yeah. So, is that your assertion? Is that your position, or is that your question?
it's not a question. It's assertion and position.
Right. So
Eh,
I have a radical idea, and if you're not comfortable with it, that's fine. Do you know any women who did or might have voted for Trump? And would you be open to the possibility of, rather than assuming what they should think, trying to understand what they do think?
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
like
you're the one who tells. I feel like you've been saying, "Don't let men tell you what to do,"
mhm.
and therefore you should do
Yeah.
what I'm telling you to do.
I no, and I even wrote that in there. Like, don't listen to what I'm saying. Do your
Okay,
own thinking. Do your own thinking. Look at the groups that you belong to. How do they
yeah.
treat you? You know, they might say all kinds of things,
And
but
I would say
what
they
do
treat
they
me like you
really
do,
do?
saying you think you know what's best for me.
I'm saying think. I'm saying, hey guys,
You right. So,
think.
but so it doesn't occur to you. So you are of the opinion that if women thought for themselves, they would necessarily agree with you.
I'm just saying that they should question things. Like they shouldn't
Okay, good.
accept.
All right, right. Okay, I think yes. Maybe that. So okay, maybe what I'm hearing then is different. I thought this is good. Right? It's like, hey, maybe what you're really doing is expressing confusion, right? Like, hey, these things seem obvious to me, and I see this happening. Something's not right here. If any of you understand this, please explain it to me because it doesn't make sense. Because are you aware of these facts
Yeah, the
and this
suffragettes,
reality? Yeah, yeah.
they could have just say, yeah, we don't need the vote. You know, we're just women. We just
Well,
make
yeah,
babies,
yeah.
and
Right. Yeah. All
they
right.
could have done that. They did not. They fought for the vote. They went to uh,
Right.
demonstrations. They went to jail.
Right.
All this, and
Right.
these other ones over here, they're doing the exact opposite. So why
Right.
is that?
And that's a great question. Like that's what I mean. Like make it a question rather than an assertion or a blame. And I think
Yeah,
that'll be a really interesting article. Yeah.
yeah,
Good. And I think, as a segue, this is one of the questions that I'm obsessed over is we talked about this last time about the schema we use shapes the answers we get, right? Is like, okay, you must choose from these three options. Either, you know, uh, uh, abortion is, morally evil, or uh, you know, once a man's sperm leaves his body, he has no rights whatsoever in anything that ever happens to it. And the the it's like, well, okay, maybe that's not the right way to frame the question, but some people are happy with those extremes, but there's a lot of people who are not happy with those extremes. They want space in the middle. They want to say, well, women have a right to their bodies, but babies have a right to live, and there's a tension between those two that we need to honor. And some people feel that way, right? And we have to at least acknowledge that that is a
yeah. But
reality.
what does anybody have to do with my body?
What
It is
if,
my body, right? Somebody else
well, I
shouldn't.
mean, so there are women who believe that if they have sex with a man and they're bearing his child, that it is legitimate for him to have some sort of say over whether that child lives. They may be wrong, but they believe that.
That's true. Yeah, I believe in that too.
Right. And so this is where the question gets complicated, is that, does that extend to parents? Does that extend to others? And, I mean, does it extend after the baby's born? There's people, and there's all sorts of questions about that, right? Like, especially in China, the rules about what, I mean, when it's like, if the woman allowed to say, I want a boy baby, therefore I can kill my daughter, as happened in China,
Mm,
right? How do you feel about that?
I, that's terrible, stupid. That now they're suffering for that.
Right. Yeah. So, like I said, so just because, well, so this is why these things are hard, and this is why we need dialogue, and this is the question of
When you say
the way
dialogue,
we.
that's the problem. The dialogue that we had here is not dialogue. That one side tries to accept facts and nature and all that stuff. The other side is just misinformation, and they happily consume it because there's some underneath they want to.
Right. So there's something that, well, so that there is absolutely that. As someone who is a Christian and hangs out in right wing circles, there are people who just want to control women's sexuality, full stop. And if they're fighting the war of sexual liberation 50 years later because they lost the first one, totally a real thing. No problem accepting that. There's other people who are survivors of abortion, said, I had an abortion, is the worst mistake I ever made. I don't want other women to have to go through that.
Well, they are entitled to show their its history, their how it affected them, but they are not entitled to force those other people to do what they
Well,
did.
so this is an interesting question, right? And I think one of the challenges is, um, what does it mean to force? And like for example, in California, we have these barbarian laws which say parents cannot beat their children and
Mhm.
husbands can't beat their wives. Back in the day, people were assumed that that was, the either a cultural norm or like, hey, stay out of my house. Don't tell me how to raise my kids.
Mhm.
Right? We decided as a society, like, no, there's certain norms that are beyond the pale that we as a society, if your child is suffering a certain way, even if they want to stay and you want to keep them, we will take the child away because we think that's the kind of society we want to be. We drew that line.
Mhm.
And most of us feel like, it's got some downsides, but it's better than the alternative. And people draw these lines. And, one of the big things that we fight over is who gets to decide based on what principles and what facts. And one of the interesting things I've been dealing with, I think this does segue a little bit into some of the stuff that by the way, I saw your David Deutsch article. I did a little bit of research on it. Is that something you had something specific you wanted to say, or you just were just sharing that that was a cool thing that had crossed your desk, Tom?
Yeah, I'm just beginning to read his stuff. I've listened to whole 1 hour things. I think he's extremely interesting, so I wanted to share that. But I'm
Yeah, he's
not
very
finished
interesting.
making up my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The big, when I had ChatGPT read it for me because I'm lazy. But one of the, I asked it, explain this to me as if I was a computer scientist interested in helping people make better decisions.
Hmm.
And the frame it took in that was this issue of the world is complicated and complex. And the um, understanding how to make decisions in the context of uncertainty is a really important skill rather than pretending that you know everything. I guess is
Hmm.
kind of the top level line I got out of that. And I did a deep dive into something called metamodernity. Have you guys heard this term? You've probably heard
Nope.
modernity and you've heard about postmodern, right?
Mhm.
So, very simplistically, modernity was there is a truth, we can know it rationally, the Enlightenment project. And once you know it, then, you know, just do that and everything will be good. And we believed that up until roughly until the 1970s. And then we realized the people who were telling us that were basically BSing us because they implicitly chose patriarchal, self-centered, authority-centric values that they were the ones who had access to the best education and the best training, and therefore they were equipped to tell us what was true. And if we disagree with them, that's because we were ignorant and uneducated and stupid. Okay. Um, so when people rebelled against that with the counterculture, we got something that we call postmodernism, which is that like there is no absolute truth that you can rationally detect. Really, truth is defined by whoever holds the most power. It's kind of a subjective thing.
Yeah.
And the best we can do is to deconstruct the narratives that the powerful impose on us. And again, a very necessary corrective. Unfortunately, that led directly to this idea that, well, if truth is just a matter of who's in power, then why in the world should I take any truth seriously? Right? I mean, this is the thing about like nuance and drawing. I was like, okay, yeah, I can see the reason for doing that, but that leads you to this really dark place where, like, well, no, I meant I wanted to deconstruct their truth. I didn't mean you should be deconstructing my truth or just ignoring it, right? That's and so the meta modernity crowd, it's been around in a while. It's only really got a name, but they draw references going back decades to similar concepts and ideas. Is that look, you can never be absolutely certain about anything because the world is just too complex to nail things down very much. But you can respect people who have you can respect epistemic processes and say, yeah, like these people are trying hard. Kind of your idea, like these are the values we live by. We try to document them and we try to live by them. We try to be held accountable to them. So there's an epistemic virtue that we should respect, even if we can't trust it completely. And that matters so that we can make ethical commitments. Like what really matters is how I trust people. What is they use the term mythos, the value system that I live by. Understanding it is not absolute. I can't say like, yes, this is absolutely true, therefore you must absolutely submit it, because then I end up in modernistic authoritarian
Mm.
domination. Um, but I can say, this is my data set that shows that this works for me and leads to this kind of a life. I think you should take it seriously. And if you want to join it, I would love to have you join me. And so that's a very crude way of thinking about metamodernity. It's having a humble but rigorous epistemology and a uh, you know an empathic ethic of trying to treat people well and understand what that means and be consciously committed to doing that, and holding this both and tension. Like, I have this ethic based on this enlightenment ideal, which may not be right for everything in every context, but I think it's right now, and that's how I'm going to act. And it is hard, right? Because we want to reach back to modernistic certainty or hide behind postmodern skepticism. And metamodernity at its best tries to keep us honest. The problem is that all of our institutions that work more or less work based on modernistic assumptions, and therefore they are blind to their own hypocrisies. And the institutions that don't work have kind of given up on values in general, and have become vehicles for freeform thought and selfish petty gain. I mean, the reason we have empires is because they were preferable to the barbarians who would just slit your throat without thinking about it. The imperialists would at least slit your throat unless they thought they could get more money by making you a slave or a peasant or a landowner. And that's why we had empires. And as we sit here on what is arguably the closing act of the American empire, how long that's going to last, we don't know. But, it feels like the first Trump election was okay, or certainly the January 6th event, whatever you want to call it, was like, okay, something fundamental is breaking down in our assumptions. The left has been telling us for years that our institutions are corrupt and should be destroyed. And Trump may very well may very well prove that true. I mean, I have a friend who's a leftist who says, his best hope is that Trump does everything he wants and screws things up so badly that people react in horror and do something different. Um,
Yeah, somebody was asking me, are you, uh, what good can you see of this? And
mhm.
the only thing that I could come up with is that Trump really does cancel the Constitution, and we have to write a new one. But
Yeah,
before that happens, some sort of conflict is going to happen. So,
right. So,
sort of
so
civil
my
uproar is
perspective is
going.
like, hey, why don't we start now? Like, why do we wait for people to get stuff? Because, like, let's be honest, and help me if you see things differently. Um, I did not want Trump to win, but I feel like he deserved to win, given how badly the Democrats talked down to the American people for so many months.
Well,
Like the whole Biden debacle, right? Where
yeah,
Biden was, yeah, I mean, like that. And then, okay, Kamala Harris, she's a nice lady. There's literally nothing about her because Biden sabotaged her from the moment she was in the White House. And now it's like, hey, vote for her because she's a woman and she's not Trump and she's a decent human being, which I frankly, that is not a bad pitch. But I can understand when people say, like, hey, you know, this is not inspiring. That, you say, like, vote for the single guy. Well, no, wait, vote for this woman instead. It's like, like, I prefer the single guy to the convict. But I can understand how reasonably people might be kind of ticked off about having that choice and chose to stay home. Like,
yeah,
why not
well,
wait for the system to burn itself down and start over again, frankly?
because I am I could be a victim. I
Yeah,
speak against Trump all the time, and I keep
yeah,
doing it, and I will keep doing it. So
yeah.
that could put me in a place.
Mhm.
Um, and where is it going?
Yeah, and so let me give you a counterexample, Ernest. Bernard Ikes, inventor of JavaScript, kicked out of his job because he voted. You exercised his constitutional right to vote in what was supposed to be a secret ballot, but someone found out, outed him, and he got kicked out of his job because he was against abortion or against gay marriage. Do you think that is that the kind of America you want where people can vote their conscience and be punished for it?
Um, hmm, that's well, he shouldn't have been found out first. Like if he were to admit, hey, I did it.
Hey, you're saying on a public podcast that you've criticized Trump. Like you didn't have to say that on a YouTube channel. You didn't have to say put your name and your face
No,
to it. You
I
did.
am proud to say, and I I did this on former Twitter. I
Yeah.
addressed Trump and his supporters, or
Yeah.
his handle, and I said, "You stupid, whatever."
So right.
And
But
I
you
was, I was told, "Hey, your speech, blah, blah, blah," which is super ironic because the speech that he uses on people is a
right.
lot more violent than what I did.
Right. Trump is the king of hypocrisy. No question about that. But here's the question, Ernest, right? Is that so like I hear what you're saying, and my sympathy, I'm brown skinned, I'm white adjacent, but I see the horrific suffering. I mean, I have a friend whose Hispanic wife threw up, he could not function because she was just devastated the day after the Trump election. Right. Like this is a seriously horrifically tragic thing. Okay. On the other hand, I know people, and it's easy for me to mock them because they're upper middle class and white, but they are terrified that if they speak their conscience, if they go to church, that they will be harassed, persecuted, kicked out of their jobs, have their children taken away from them. I can say to them, hey, I think you're being a little unrealistic, a little excessively fearful. But I could say that to my friend's Hispanic wife too, and that doesn't feel right. And it doesn't feel right for me to say, your fears are totally irrational. You need to get over it. Versus, I see where you're coming from. That might be a little excessive, but I think that's a totally understandable reaction to have. And this is the challenge.
Well, to me, the basic thing is like, we say we're a country of laws and justice, yet we just
And
said
free speech and free
and
religion.
free, and all that is being violated. Like, okay,
Yes. But,
no one's no one's above the law. We
but
just made it.
worse, and the tragedy is everyone is pissed off that their rights are being violated. And they're totally okay with other people's rights being violated. That's the political discourse that we have in America now, and it sucks.
Yeah, but I see that mostly on, I don't know if it's my worldview, but I see that mostly on the right.
You see it.
I think that the
You
left,
don't see it. Like you don't see people I know who are living in fear, who pass along the stories of what happened in Waco, of what happened this, and all the stories of people who are trying to vote their conscience, live their lives, who are harassed, persecuted. I mean, stuff that happened during Prop 8 was not pretty on both sides, right? And my point is this: you have an absolute right to your grievance.
Mhm.
I'm not sure you have a right to totally dismiss anybody else's grievance.
Mm, well, according to my worldview, it's like you have to be honest. If you say that you have some certain values, you have to consistently observe them, right?
Right, and that's what I was
We,
asking you about in the way that you talk to women. If your women is that men shouldn't be telling women what to do.
well, I'm telling you, hey, observe. Like, okay, you have
Right.
religions, like let's say they're holy and all those
Yeah, I
things.
thought that was really clever. Yeah. No, and like
Why
let's go.
is
Yeah, I love that, Ernest. I love this idea. Let's call each other up to our highest values, and let's call our own side out on the hypocrisies that enable the other side to function. Right? Like I said, I wish I would. Life would be simpler in a lot of ways for me if Trump did not win. Not least of which it's easier for me to grieve over middle class white people being persecuted than poor brown babies, because that's just where I'm at, right? Um, but to say that, well, therefore, you know, it would have been better if Trump had lost, is like, well, all those other problems are still there, right? All the hypocrisy, the elitism, but my favorite one, I don't know if you've heard this one, Tom, is that the Republicans are the party that believe in abstract principles over the welfare of real flesh and blood human beings. The Democrats are the party that believe in the welfare of idealized hypothetical human beings over the welfare of real flesh and blood human beings. You know,
uh Well,
It's a joke on both
mm,
sides, but there's some truth to it, right? It's like, okay, like they're the party of, if you believe these sorts of things are true, then, like, then they want to support you, and if you don't, then you're the enemy that needs to be defeated, right? You know, and so this is a, like it, and like I said, it was really disturbing and tragic. Like, forget any morality in terms of the impact it had on the electorate. The fact that the Democrats were utterly blind to the fact that the popular vote would go against them, that they felt like party loyalty to Biden was more important than telling the truth to the American people. Like, they sabotaged themselves. They violated a lot of the values that I think you stand for, about honesty and transparency and clear-eyed assessment of reality. And, I still would have preferred, not to have to deal with Trump, but this is the reality we have. And this is the thing I think that is important in this season is, how do we build and this is where the meta-modern framing to me is interesting. We're like, okay, we can't be certain, but we can at least try to be honest and rigorous in our thinking and our data. And we can't be perfect, but we can try to say, hey, and this is actually not a small thing at all. How do we extend empathy to everybody, not just those who look like me or think like me or agree with me, right? And I think this meta-modern impulse, it's not perfect. It's got issues. The people doing it have their own flaws. But at least when I hear them talk, it's like, okay, these people are at least trying not to be insane. Whereas a
Mm.
lot of times when I hear people talking today, it feels like they're trying very hard to be insane,
mm, mm.
to avoid dealing with any reality, to avoid thinking about the consequences of their
They're
actions.
eating
They just
cats
want to
and
morally
dogs.
posture to convince themselves that they're the ones who are right.
Yes, and that's where the crux of my argument goes. Don't let one man, which usually one man, tell you what to do. Some
Yes.
that guy says, is if I don't say it, then it's not
I
the truth.
loved. I can't wait to see how you manage to do that without telling people what to do. This is going to be amazing.
No,
I look
yeah,
forward
well,
to it.
I tell them, do your research. Like,
Yeah,
why is
right.
it that
Well,
most religions on earth have the man on top, and most scripture have the man on top? Why is it? I mean, is it a coincidence? I think not.
well,
Uh,
so have you ever heard the term equity feminism?
uh, Probably, but what is your
It was
opinion?
a movement in the 90s, and like I said, I'm not saying you agree with it, but it's worth at least thinking what the women themselves have to say about it, right?
Mm.
And they said, look, there is a strand throughout history of women being victimized by men. And that is true. We need to acknowledge that. There's also enormous numbers of stories of men sacrificing themselves for women to protect their wives, and their children at great personal cost, undergoing heroic suffering and sacrifices to provide for their families. And we need to honor that too. And we're not saying that men are evil for subjugating. They were responding to economic incentives as women were. Some people responded nobly, some people responded horribly, but that is the inheritance we had. And therefore, the idea of trying to understand. So one way of looking at it is the men's were the ones who most often got killed or had to volunteer to get killed to pull this off. And that was sort of the social bargain that was struck, is that the man would work and go to war and die to protect his wife and child. And so in a warrior culture where that was a very real possibility of dying, they idealized their god as a warrior king, who was on top. Christianity is sort of bizarre in that our warrior king was also the guy who got nailed to a cross at the bottom. Um,
Well,
but we don't have to go into that now. But yeah, so like there's historical reasons why. There's reasons why those historical values, don't match current reality. And this is the interesting question of, how do we adapt to this new reality? How do we find a way to start talking to each other rather than past each other? How do we find a way to use, and the hardest problem is that, like, the alternative in most cases was anarchy. And anarchy is really bad for women and children. men tend to do okay in anarchy, but it's horrific to be a child in war. It's horrific to be a woman in a world where there is no law, there is no society, there is no civilization. And, anarchy is not common, but it's not impossible, right? I mean, and frankly, what I have heard, and I'm hardly an expert on this, is that women who voted for Trump did this because there was a sense of the world is a dangerous place, and for people like me, Trump will probably make it safer. And it means that people who are not like them, they try not to think about,
But
which is sad.
yeah. To me, that's an absolute lie that Trump was saying. Trump's people were saying. But
Okay, so,
he
so, so
didn't.
you're saying when you say it's an absolute lie as opposed to a gross exaggeration, are you
Uh,
saying that
Trump is
so
not.
so
Trump is
so,
not.
so
Well,
I understand that Trump lies, no question about that. Trump does a number of bizarre things that even his critics agree have been, this was the Metamodern thought that I heard, which was extraordinarily generous. I don't know if it's true, but it's at least a question worth asking. He says, okay, clearly the left is better at thinking rationally about what's going on. Equally clearly, the left appears to be completely out of touch with what people are actually feeling. And he says, the right has a allergy to clear logical thinking. But it seems like maybe there's this sort of collective subconscious understanding that people are worried about the border. People are worried about China. People are worried about the economy.
what are you
And
talking about? Because
sorry,
the
are you?
right tells them. The
So
right
no, no,
tells
so
them.
no, so no, so slow down. Are you saying that there's no reason to be worried about the border? There's no reason to be worried about China. There's no reason to be worried about the economy.
The border there's has been going better. Like there have been fewer illegal immigration in across the years. But the right, it has.
Sorry.
Okay,
So here's
we
the thing,
had a
right? Okay, right.
solution. We had a solution in law
Yes.
coming. Trump
Yeah.
stopped it, and yet he
Yeah.
didn't lose. He still could use
No,
that.
no, no, no. So sorry. Trump, opportunistic, evil, whatever. Right. Uh, the point is, like, Trump called. You got to give Trump credit. Trump called China before anybody else did. Now it's kind of mainstream to say China's kind of a big threat to democracy. We ought to be careful about this. Trump was way out ahead of his time when he was being a jerk on China,
Well,
right?
I thought that before him, but
Trump,
okay.
Peter Zeihan, who hates Trump, said the one thing I respect about Trump is he rebuilt NAFTA, and Mexico will be our most valuable trading partner. Like there's things that Trump does which are like, and it pains me to say it because his personality and his values grate on me horrifically. But the things he's done, well, I have to say, like, like that was, like, for example, I'm a big supporter of Ukraine. There is a chance, because Trump is so narrow and short-sighted, he might actually bring peace to Ukraine accidentally because he just doesn't care.
And
And
Europe is going to say they don't care. The Europeans, they're going to
no,
say
no,
we can't rely on the US. We have to unite ourselves and do it
yeah,
ourselves. I hope
right.
France and Poland send their troops to Ukraine
Yeah, yeah,
and kick
yeah,
Russia's
yeah,
ass.
yeah. That's right. So, I mean, but there is a case to be made, and Zion made it at least, that Biden's preferred strategy was to not destabilize Russia and not let Russia win. So he preferred to let the Ukrainians grind it out as long as possible with no conclusion in his lifetime.
Yeah, but
And I mean, it's not, I don't know if I buy it, but it's certainly not inconsistent with the evidence.
yeah, I would have given him, hey, go take this
Right.
missile, fire them
And
whatever
so,
you want.
so it's possible. It could go either way. I mean, Trump is a wild card. I wouldn't want to bet on him, but I don't necessarily want to bet against him. Where because Trump doesn't care, he says, look, either you guys sort it out or I'm just going to, nuke whoever doesn't give in, you know? And, and the Ukrainians say, okay, well, we don't want you to nuke us. We'll accept a compromise. And Russia says, no, we refuse to compromise. And then Trump nukes them and then, Russia's gone, right? Like it could happen. stranger things have happened, and I wouldn't rule it out. And like that's the thing that's weird is that. And by the way, this is just as a personal story. I've been doing a lot of inner healing, you know, practice. And one of the things that I had some family member conversations after the election. And one of the things I realized is that my religion is empirical validation, where some of my family members, their religion is communal solidarity. And they will adjust they will abuse facts to maintain the community, and I will abuse people to maintain the facts. And what I had to realize is that my religion is not necessarily better than theirs. I just like it more. And so one of the things that I've been really working hard on, and it's really been forcing me to develop, and I hate to say it, empathy for Trump, and is that maybe they feel something that they're really bad at putting into words. And maybe I'm trying to do something that is really out of touch with what people actually need. And how do I come together as a more holistic human being to understand my feelings and theirs, to analyze the things I find offensive with the same charity that I analyze the horrible things that people I love do. And maybe that would be a wiser and more intelligent and more humane version of me than the one I currently have.
And we put that to the people. Hey, we have this people, this person who's a uniter. She gets opinion from everybody. We have this other person who doesn't,
Right, who lies to us behind our back rather than to our face.
and we chose that person. So,
and what I'm saying is, I don't like that choice. Let's build the third way now, rather than trying to fight the old wars.
okay,
But by the way, just as a silly interjection, I voted for Gilb.
Yeah, Libertarian?
Green Party.
Green Party, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't vote at all because I find that, but.
Yeah, so that's a problem. That's that vote for Gilb was.
I mean, if he's not in a swing state, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, like in this system that we have, voting third party is just a waste.
Right, and so that's
right?
Andrew Young's trying to fix that. Right, yeah, but the point is that theoretically it's a waste. In practice, most voting is a waste anyway. Because if you're in California, it's going to go blue. You have a 1 in a million chance. Your voting power is minuscule. And
so I did
bizarre,
one more thing. I gave $100 to Harris.
So I'll tell you what I did, because this is a fun story. And I have a neighbor who is very blue, and because she lives in California, she knows she can't do anything to change the presidential election directly. So she was raising money to help register voters in Pennsylvania. And so she was asking around, and some of the people around here are much more on the conservative side, and they were a little offended that this neighbor was asking them to support this thing, or I felt kind of awkward about it, but then I felt awkward feeling like where I said, okay, what is my most important value? And my most important value, I guess it's very metamodern, is that I treat the people around me the way I would want to be treated, even when I disagree with them. So I knocked on her door and I said, hey, I baked some of my purple cookies, which I did for this Drop the Stone thing, the bot that you guys worked with. And I said, hey, I am religiously non-political, but I know it took you an enormous amount of courage and vulnerability to tell people, ask people to help you support something that you believe deeply in. And I just wanted to celebrate you for that. So I baked these cookies for you to take to your event, these little kindness cookies to say like, hey, thank you for standing up for what you believe in. I just ask you to remember kindness. And she actually wrote my parents and said how much that touched her and moved her. And it sounds silly, it sounds small, and maybe it is, right? Because there is an evil world out there full of people who want to do really horrible things, and you have to be able to do something about it. The problem is the people on the other side believe the same thing, and that's what motivates them to do those horrible things.
When you say the
And
same
if
thing, what do you mean?
is that this is what all my friends on the right say. There's all these people want to do all these horrible things to our
What
kids, to our
horrible things?
families. Uh, brainwash our kids, change their
What do you,
sex.
well, that's made up. Like,
Is
uh,
it?
it is like
Would
there
you
are
would
no
you say that's
teachers,
100% made up or grossly
there are no
exaggerated?
children going in the morning to school as a man and then coming back as a woman.
Okay, not
That doesn't
literally, but
happen.
there are children who are being told that, hey, if you have these feelings, maybe it's because you're born in the wrong body, and we can't tell your parents this. Your parents don't need to know this, but this is what we believe. That is legal in California.
Well, you can talk to them. You can
Right,
inform
right.
people of
Sorry,
all.
but would you be comfortable if I had people in the school saying, okay, we can't tell your parents this, but we think you really need to be a Christian? If that was happening in our public schools, how would you feel about that?
um well, a Christian, um I wouldn't like that.
Yeah,
But
so that's how they feel,
what
right? They
people are
feel
not,
that their most important values can be subverted without their say so or knowledge.
but
And that's why they feel like they're under attack. I'm not saying it's right, I'm saying it's valid.
what I think adults are saying to kids is like, it is okay. Don't, like, so there's this kid
What
who's
is
being
okay?
bullied.
Which things are okay?
There's this kid, he's being bullied, he's a little effeminate, and he's being bullied because of that. And he feels terrible, and he's thinking about killing himself. Some people have to, like, oh, his parents are like, oh, you got to be a man, brr, brr, brr. And
Right, right. So,
that's why
right,
he's
so, right, so again, you can understand why people feel way, right? And it's like, okay, if you pick the extreme, you can say, okay, at this extreme, I can see this point. At the other extreme, you can see that point. And the problem is, politics and the real world live in the middle, and people feel angst and pain about that, right? And the, you know, and my point is precisely this: is like this is the hard thing. How do we create a context where we live together in some semblance of peace and harmony without, assassination and violent riots being the preferred modes of expression? Uh, by the way, it's not at all obvious that this is solvable, right? It's happened in the past because, frankly, there was a elite overclass that controlled information, and the rest of us were too afraid or cowed or complacent to do anything about it. Now that we have a divided overclass, it's a kind of a new ground. We have never seen this sort of thing. You may know more history than I do, Tom, where you've had a uh, lack of a shared cultural narrative or a strong man who can enforce a narrative. It's new territory.
Hmm.
And
I want to interrupt and inject an idea.
sure,
So, if my language mind is saying is trying to analyze stakeholders and then their values, and but I'm going to simplify the conversation. If we in our lifetime could make one value, examples of values, truthfulness, happiness, justice, that kind of stuff. If we could choose one of them and make it better, which one would that be?
Yeah, I
Because
guess we
that's
have.
maybe all we could do in a lifetime.
Okay.
What did you say, Ernest?
Between the three of us, we will probably have three. I would
Yeah.
say, you know, I would say, I would say science. To me, the whole facts and study and
Okay.
research, that's it.
Right. Good. Okay. Now, by the way, earlier in this conversation, my mind was in that direction. The idea of truth is another way of saying it, right? Helping people appreciate the difference between false information and true information. So I'm at least give, one vote for that. What do you say, Ernie? Highest? Good?
And Ernie, you're
I
muted.
can't.
You're muted.
You're muted. Yeah.
I'll just be honest. The last time I had to figure out this, I ended up stuck between three different things. I called this the ethical trilemma, and this is just literally it's a practical question. Do I act in a way that maximizes people's belief in truth? Do I act in a way that maximizes other people's happiness? Or do I
Mhm.
act in a way that maximizes my own happiness? And I kind of ended up in a place where I think that all three of those are in tension. And if I pick any one over the other two, really horrible things happen.
Any two or more things are going to be in tension or conflict. That's a given. But
Right. And yeah. And
but
so if I could
the
pick one
game
thing
is
to
the
improve,
game is pick one just for the sake of the discussion.
and like, is that if I had to pick one thing, it would be whatever virtue or system allows me to balance those three things.
Okay,
Okay.
And I'll give it a
I
name
call
if
that
you want me.
it's actually Gilb's prioritization methods, and they're written up in my books, which I just sent
Right,
you
but
copies
the
of.
point is, and this is the okay. But my point is that is not a thing that a bunch of smart people can sit down in a room and impose. It has
No,
to be
no.
something that is organically, like
Okay.
Deutsch's book about
Now,
the nature of evolution. It has to be something that can
let me push me
organically
out.
evolve
Yeah,
in a
I
transparent
sent
way.
you
Yeah,
I sent you an email, both of you, and it has a list of the books I've written this summer, and one of them is called Optima,
right. We
and
just discussed that briefly a couple months ago.
that is a book about the balance, because I also think that it's not one or the other; it's about reasonable balance. And so, just for fun, given our timing here and everything, I will put my money on if we could improve reasonable balance.
Too
That's where I'd
fair.
want to go.
Yeah, and I think here's the thing that I struggle with is that I can come up with and this is literally when I do language, like I can come up with a set of words that roughly represent what I feel, but then when I put them into a formal system and see what the implications are, I realize I don't like that result. And sometimes that means that I just need to own my values and suck up the result. But sometimes it means the words that I used were flawed and the thing that I actually want is different than that. And I worry, as a practical point, literally in my day job and my family, as well as politically, how do we make sure that people who are not good at articulating their pain in ways that are easy for others to understand also get their pain represented in these systems? And
I
this is
like that
particularly,
question. That's
because I think
good.
that's yeah. Maybe we'll
Yeah.
leave that as the thing to hang in the air for
This might boil down to a mechanistic process of stakeholder analysis. What are the values of stakeholders? Whereas one stakeholders, those who are not so good at articulating their values.
yeah. If you have a language solution for that, I would love to hear it.
Of course I have.
All
But
right.
by the way, as we're winding down, I want to mention one thing that has happened recently that may also interest you. Let's see. Uh, okay, I want to I want to. Okay, I've added a chapter to the book I also sent you the link to called Strategy. Okay, and uh, here it is. Oh, sorry, I better share. Hello, share. Zoom. Yep, share. Okay, there it is. Okay, so I don't know how good we are going to be at. Uh, can you see my slide there?
Uh, I see not the slide. I see the whole thing.
Yeah, planning art at the top left.
No. I see
Okay,
your
right.
document, not your presentation.
Okay.
Planning art, yeah. Okay, yeah. I see the first column has planning art at the top.
Oh,
Okay. Let me go back. Uh, I need to make a long story short, and you can pick this up whenever you want to. I'm perceived by people as the guy who wants to bring in this mechanistic engineering into planning and sort of shoves human feelings and things like that aside. And so a friend of mine and I, he mentioned something like the art of listening, something like that. And I said, well, there are lots of arts and they're all very interesting and they are complementary to an engineering discipline. And so we made a list of it and too damn many. Uh, anyway, we made a list of it. Here's some of the list: listening, praising, suggesting, visualizing, analyzing. And I then, using perplexity, I got it to match up these ideas with my engineering ideas, the ideas of language. And I sincerely believe that getting good at these arts, the art of analyzing politics, leadership, building trust, is a very good thing. It helps you apply the engineering in good, effective ways. So I actually got, I got here's even a more detailed table with these planning arts on the left. There's a definition in case you wonder what it is. There is what we could teach, what people could learn about better listening. Here's how to measure that we're doing it well. And here's how this integrates into the engineering. And there are plenty of little citations. I pushed one of them to more detailed information on it. But and what I wanted to point out to you was I've written a whole chapter in since last Friday, actually, on the arts which complement the engineering disciplines. And it's kind of crazy. I mean, I've never done that before, even though
Hmm.
it's always been there with me. I've never talked about it, I've never written a paper about it, never mentioned it. And the moment I make this list and think about it, think about what I do, I said, well, these arts are very important things and they could be taught and cultures could value them and lots of other interesting things. So using perplexity, I tried to organize and structure the relationship of multiple arts with multiple engineering processes. And that's all I want. I just want to tell you that, and it's there for you to read if you're interested.
no, of course,
All
sounds
right.
great.
Thank you. All right. I guess we will leave it there and post some articles and I guess December people still around.
Sure.
Yeah.
Although
Okay, I
it's my
think it'll still work.
birthday on it's my birthday on December 24th, and I'm be 84 years old, just so you know.
Mm,
Wow. Congratulations.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can congratulate me when I'm at 114. That's the long-term
Okay.
objective.
All right.
All right. If I'm around long enough to do that, that will be an achievement on my side. Take care.